Everything was perfect, until the Sheikh opened his mouth. It was supposed to be just another opulent evening. The chandeliers sparkled above fine wine and finer conversations. The room was filled with CEOs, politicians, and old money heirs dressed in custom suits and gowns worth more than most people's homes. But in the middle of all this wealth, power, and polished pride, one moment would flip the night upside down. The Sheikh, silent until now, stood and began to speak in his native Arabic. A language rich with poetry, wisdom, and history. A language he expected others in this elite gathering to understand, or at least to respect. But no one responded. They didn't know what he said. Some chuckled nervously. Others pretended to understand. The rest simply sipped their champagne, hoping the moment would pass. And just when the silence grew awkward, almost painful, she spoke. Not a guest. Not a diplomat. Not one of the esteemed invitees. The maid. The black woman in the corner, the one they'd all ignored all evening. She answered in fluent, graceful Arabic. Her words weren't just correct, they were beautiful, powerful, poetic. Even the Sheikh was stunned. And in that one moment, the entire room's understanding of power, respect, and value was shattered. Welcome to Dream Tale, where we bring stories that awaken the soul, challenge the norm, and sometimes leave you speechless. If you're visiting us for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe because we're just getting started. And here's a question for you to think about. Have you ever underestimated someone, only to realize they were more than you could ever imagine? Because that's exactly what happened in tonight's story. And trust me, you'll want to hear it all. So what's this story really about? It's not just about a wealthy sheikh. It's not just about a maid who spoke Arabic. It's about how we treat people we believe are beneath us. It's about the quiet brilliance that goes unnoticed because of status, skin color, or uniforms. It's about how true respect cannot be bought, and real intelligence doesn't always wear a suit. This is a tale that crosses languages, continents, and human ego. It's the kind of story that reminds us that no matter who you are, or how rich, educated, or important you think you've become, there's always someone in the room who knows more, feels deeper, and sees right through the mask. Over the next few chapters, you'll step into this world of luxury, pride, and hidden genius. You'll meet the sheikh who thought he knew his guests, the crowd that thought they owned the evening, and the maid who owned their silence. So sit back, stay curious, and get ready for a journey that ends not with a shout, but with a quiet voice that echoed louder than any applause. This is Dream Tale. And this is where real stories come alive. The Sheikh's estate was more than just a mansion. It was a kingdom carved into the heart of Europe's elite circles. A place where wealth whispered from marble staircases and respect was measured by the brands stitched onto a guest's collar. The night's event was exclusive, invitation only, and carefully curated. Diplomats, investors, royalty, and heirs to empires had all RSVP'd without hesitation. When the Sheikh called, the powerful came. Valets moved like clockwork at the front entrance, opening doors to luxury vehicles as if performing a silent ballet. Inside, uniformed staff moved with practiced precision. Champagne flowed freely. Hors d'oeuvres were served on gold-edged trays. The chandeliers glimmered like stars hanging low over an earth-bound heaven. The guests? Polished, loud, confident. They clinked glasses and traded stories of hedge funds, oil contracts, and high-level politics. A few practiced French. Others boasted in English, German, or Spanish. But no one spoke Arabic, not even out of courtesy. And that's when she entered the frame. Not through the grand entrance. Not announced. Just there, part of the background. The maid. A woman in her late 20s, wearing a crisp black uniform and white apron, her hair pulled back neatly. She moved like she was invisible. Not unnoticed, but unseen. People walked past her, spoke around her, even dismissed her without a word. She wasn't even a servant in their eyes, just furniture that moved. But she watched, and listened, and remembered. She passed by groups as they spoke carelessly about topics they assumed no outsider would understand. One man made an arrogant comment about help from the third world. Another joked that the sheikh probably had no idea who half these people were, just that they were rich. No one noticed the flicker in her eyes. The kind that says, "I understand more than you think." Every time she placed a glass down or cleared a plate, she heard pieces of conversations. She understood more languages than they'd guess, and she understood the people too. Their tone, their posture, their games. She noticed the sheikh too. Quiet, reserved, watching. He hadn't spoken much yet. Just a few words here and there, translated or filtered through assistants. But his eyes had been scanning the room, judging, evaluating, like he was waiting for something, or perhaps waiting to be disappointed. He watched how people treated his staff. How they looked at the maid like she didn't exist. How they faked knowledge of his culture without ever speaking his language. And maybe, that's when he decided. He would test them. Not with a deal. Not with politics. But with a language that no translator could carry for them. A language of his roots, his pride, his identity. But for now the night went on. Laughter filled the rooms. The music played softly. The elite mingled like gods above the world. And in the corner of it all, a maid continued to do her job, quietly, gracefully, listening to everything, and preparing for the moment none of them saw coming. The Sheikh had built his empire not just with oil but with silence. He had learned early in life that the loudest man in the room was rarely the smartest. That power didn't need to shout, it simply had to wait. And on this particular evening, he was waiting for the moment that would separate those who respected him from those who merely respected his money. As the night wore on, he remained distant but observant. Guests came to shake his hand, offering smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Many of them had memorized a few Arabic greetings, probably taught by assistants right before arriving. But he noticed, none of them dared go beyond shallow pleasantries. No one engaged him with the warmth and curiosity they showed one another. It was as if they expected him to adapt to their world, their language, their rules. He chuckled softly to himself. They think money makes them fluent in culture. Then it happened. He stood up. The room didn't notice at first. They were too deep in conversations, lost in their own echo chambers of status and relevance. But gradually, like a ripple spreading through water, the guests began to quiet down. Eyes turned. Phones lowered. A hush fell. The Sheikh cleared his throat gently, then began to speak. Not in English. Not in French. But in his mother tongue, Arabic. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't loud. It wasn't for show. It was a simple story. About his childhood. About his father's teachings. About humility. His words were rich, full of imagery. He spoke of a proverb his father used to repeat. True honor is like perfume, it spreads even when sealed. He spoke about respect, not just for people who wear silk or carry influence, but for those who serve, who clean, who stand quietly and observe. But as his story flowed, something became painfully clear. No one in the room understood a word. A few glanced at each other awkwardly, hoping someone would translate. One man laughed nervously, thinking it might be a joke. Another woman leaned toward a friend, whispering, "What is he saying?" The Sheikh didn't pause. He didn't explain. He simply continued, gracefully, unapologetically. Then he stopped. Silence. A heavy silence. The kind that presses down on a room when pride meets discomfort. Everyone stood still, unsure of what to say, how to respond, or if they should even clap. Then came the voice. Soft, clear, fluent. "I understand, Your Excellency." Your father's words still breathe through yours. Head snapped around. The sound didn't come from the front, nor from a well-dressed guest. It came from the back. From the corner. From the maid. She stepped forward, hands folded gently, eyes fixed on the Sheikh, not with fear but with deep respect. And for the first time that evening, the Sheikh smiled. You could hear a pin drop. The entire ballroom, filled with billionaires, board members, aristocrats, stood frozen, stunned into silence by the voice of a woman no one had truly seen all night. There she was, in her crisp black and white uniform, standing with calm grace among giants. No microphone. No spotlight. Just a steady voice that cut through the awkward tension like a blade. And she didn't just understand Arabic, she lived it. She repeated the Sheikh's proverb fluently, then offered a soft interpretation of its meaning in Arabic. Her dialect was flawless. Her intonation respectful, almost musical. She even bowed slightly, an elegant gesture of humility and reverence. The Sheikh's eyes sparkled with something rare, genuine admiration. He gestured for her to continue. And she did. In Arabic, she responded with a proverb of her own. Gold does not fear fire, because it emerges purer. The crowd began to stir. This wasn't just translation. This was poetry. This was power dressed in humility. She went on, briefly explaining that she had studied Arabic literature and culture during her time at university, before life had taken a turn. She didn't say it for pity. There was no self-promotion. Just quiet, measured facts wrapped in elegant language. One guest whispered, "She's a maid?" Another said, "Wait, how does she speak Arabic?" But the Sheikh? He already understood. He had known from the moment she spoke her first sentence. This woman didn't just know his language, she respected his heritage. She hadn't greeted him with hollow praise. She hadn't tried to impress him with wealth or flattery. She had simply understood him in the one way that mattered most, through culture, language, and sincerity. He looked around the room now, seeing the embarrassment wash over his guests. Men who prided themselves on worldliness now exposed as hollow. Women who called themselves global citizens couldn't even recognize a proverb when it was spoken aloud. And yet here stood a woman who wasn't invited, wasn't acknowledged, wasn't respected. Until now. The Sheikh stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. And in Arabic he asked, "What is your name, daughter?" She answered, "Aliyah, your excellency." A moment passed. Then the Sheikh turned to the crowd and in perfect English said, "Tonight only one of you understood me. And she was not the richest. But she is perhaps the wisest." A gasp. Pause. And then something no one expected, applause. It began softly, then louder. Not out of pity, but out of respect. Genuine, earned, thunderous respect. Aliyah simply bowed her head and quietly stepped back, graceful, proud, and unchanged by the sudden attention. But the room would never see her the same way again. After the moment passed and the evening resumed, whispers rippled through the grand hall like a current no one could control. Everyone wanted to know, who was this woman? Where did she come from? And how could someone so seemingly ordinary possess a presence that stopped the room cold? But Aliyah? She didn't bask in the attention. She returned to her duties with calm dignity, declining offers to speak further. She didn't need the spotlight, she had already said everything that mattered. And yet, behind that composed face, was a lifetime of resilience. Aliyah was born in Senegal, in a modest household filled with love and books. Her father, a retired schoolteacher, believed that language was a passport, one that didn't just take you places but taught you how to understand them when you arrived. He taught her Arabic before she even learned French. He insisted she memorize proverbs, ancient texts, and the poetry of Mahmoud Darwish and Nizar Kabani. Her mother, a seamstress, taught her grace and humility. "People may forget your words but never how you made them feel," she used to say. When Aliyah won a scholarship to study abroad, she chose Middle Eastern studies. She studied at a respected university, fluent in Arabic, English, and Wolof. But life took an unexpected turn. Her father passed away. Her scholarship ended prematurely. And with no support left, she stayed in Europe, taking whatever jobs she could to survive. Eventually she became a housemaid, not because she lacked talent, but because she carried the kind of quiet pride that refused to beg. She cleaned homes with the same precision she once used to translate Arabic poetry. She listened to conversations like a scholar, always learning, always observing. And in the Sheikh's mansion, she was invisible only to those who saw status instead of substance. But that night she didn't speak to prove anything. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't trying to climb a ladder. She responded because the Sheikh's words resonated. Because they reminded her of her own father. Because dignity deserves dignity. The Sheikh of course sensed this. Later that evening, as the party wound down, he quietly requested her presence. The room hushed again as she stepped forward. No grand announcement. No dramatic reveal. Just respect. He didn't ask about her past or her story. He simply said, "Your father raised you well." She nodded, tears gently brimming but not falling. And in that brief moment they understood each other, not as Sheikh and servant, but as two people bound by a shared reverence for culture, language, and humility. The guests watched in awe. Because Aliyah hadn't just spoken Arabic, she had spoken truth. And it had done something none of their money, education, or power could have done. It had moved hearts. And reminded everyone of something they'd forgotten. Wisdom wears no uniform. The morning after the gala, the halls of wealth were buzzing, not with market reports or investment opportunities, but with one name, Aliyah. Executives texted each other in disbelief. Society pages that normally reserved their headlines for diamond auctions and political scandals were now focused on the mystery maid who spoke flawless Arabic and humbled a room full of elites without raising her voice. Some reacted with discomfort. "How could we not know she was this educated?" one guest asked, sipping espresso in a penthouse office. Others were intrigued. "We need to find her background. Maybe she has potential." As if potential only existed when someone of status noticed it. But the truth was simpler, and far more uncomfortable. They hadn't seen Aliyah because they had never looked. They had walked past her, spoken around her, placed wine glasses in her hands without acknowledging the person holding them. And now, the illusion that knowledge and grace belonged only to the elite had been publicly shattered by a woman they had dismissed. The Sheikh's circle, however, saw something different. They saw a reminder, a quiet warning that intelligence doesn't need validation from titles, that true refinement speaks in action and understanding, not volume or fashion. Among them the story spread. Some began to reflect. Others tried to downplay what happened, calling it a charming moment or a nice gesture by the Sheikh. But deep down they knew it was more than that. It was a shift, a crack in the polished mask of arrogance, a realization that they had become too comfortable equating wealth with wisdom. In private lounges and boardroom lunches, they tried to make sense of what had occurred. Some wondered if the Sheikh had planned it, a test, a trap. But no, that moment had been too raw, too real. The Sheikh didn't orchestrate it. He had simply created space for authenticity. And Aliyah filled it with something they had long forgotten: truth. Meanwhile, back in the Sheikh's estate, Aliyah continued her work with the same humility she always had. She never once mentioned the event. She didn't gloat. She didn't ask for a promotion. She didn't change her behavior. But everything around her changed. The other staff began to look at her differently. With pride. With respect. Even admiration. Guests, once blind to her presence, now hesitated before making assumptions. The chef began to speak to her with genuine interest, asking about her background. A new maid whispered, "I want to learn languages too." And yet, Aliyah remained grounded. She still folded napkins perfectly. She still walked with quiet grace. Because for her, greatness didn't mean rising above, it meant lifting the space around you without needing to be seen. The Sheikh too was thoughtful. He understood the ripple effect of a single moment. He had seen it happen before, with wars, with peace treaties, with oil deals. But never with a whisper from the back of a room. Now he was watching it happen again, with a woman whose strength was in her silence. And while the world buzzed in gossip and fascination, Aliyah stayed true to herself. Because she didn't need recognition. She had something far rarer, self-respect earned through wisdom, not wealth. In the days following the event, while the world speculated, the Sheikh remained silent. He didn't issue a press release. He didn't host another grand gathering. He simply reflected on a conversation, a voice, and a moment that had humbled the prideful and elevated the unseen. But deep within the walls of his estate, a decision had already taken root. He summoned Aliyah one morning, not to a grand hall or formal office, but to the garden where he often went to think. There were no guards, no servants, just the quiet hum of birdsong and wind rustling through the palms. Aliyah approached cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron, unsure what this meeting meant. The Sheikh offered her tea and gestured to the bench beside him. "I've been asked many times since that night," he began, "why I spoke Arabic, knowing most wouldn't understand. Some think it was arrogance. Others think it was a statement." He looked at her, his eyes steady. "But I spoke for one reason. I wanted to see who truly listens." Aliyah lowered her gaze, modest as always. "You did," he continued. "Not because you wanted to impress, but because you understood. And that matters to me more than any title, any fortune, any fake compliment I've received." She nodded slowly, unsure where this was leading. Then came the offer. "I want you to take a new role in my foundation," he said plainly. "You'll assist with cultural outreach. Languages, education, community work. It's a real position with full pay and benefits. You won't be a maid anymore." Aliyah was stunned. She opened her mouth to speak but hesitated. Her voice, usually so clear, caught in her throat. The Sheikh waited patiently. "Your Excellency," she said quietly, "I'm honored, but why me? So many others have degrees, experience." He smiled. "Because you listen. Because you carry wisdom in silence. Because you showed this house, no, this world, that respect cannot be bought. It is earned." Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted. But the Sheikh wasn't done. "I also want to fund a scholarship in your father's name. For girls like you, brilliant, overlooked, and full of light." This time the tears came. And not just hers. Because in that moment, all the walls Aliyah had built to survive came down. The shame she had carried for scrubbing floors despite her education. The frustration of being unseen despite her brilliance. All of it washed away by a simple truth. She had been seen. Not by a stranger. But by someone powerful enough to change lives, and humble enough to see value in silence. News of the Sheikh's decision spread quickly, but this time it wasn't gossip. It was inspiration. For once, a story about the rich wasn't about greed, but grace. And a woman from the shadows had risen, not because she shouted, but because she listened. And now, she had a voice loud enough to echo far beyond the golden gates of wealth. Aliyah's promotion wasn't just a personal victory, it became a symbol. When the news quietly slipped into the public domain, it wasn't accompanied by scandal or flashy headlines. No viral drama. Just a photo of Aaliyah, no longer in a maid's uniform but in a modest, professional outfit, sitting at a round table with educators, community leaders and translators, helping develop outreach programs for underserved youth. What surprised everyone wasn't just her new title, it was her purpose. She didn't use her new role to elevate herself. She used it to lift others who, like her, had been ignored. Girls working 2 jobs while studying in secret. Immigrants fluent in multiple languages but trapped in low-paying work. Elders who never got the chance to read in their own tongue. Aaliyah started going to schools, especially in marginalized neighborhoods. She didn't speak like a politician or present like a celebrity. She spoke plainly, honestly, sharing her story, not the version dressed up for the media but the real one. The hard one. "I used to serve coffee to men who wouldn't look me in the eye," she'd say. "But I knew 5 languages. And one day that mattered." Young girls listened. Boys leaned forward. Teachers cried in the back of the room. Because they saw something that had become too rare in their world. Representation wrapped in humility. Back at the Sheikh's estate, things changed too. The staff dynamics shifted. The cleaning ladies and gardeners began to share more of their own backgrounds. Turns out, Aaliyah wasn't the only one with degrees and dreams. There were men who once taught math in war-torn countries, women who had run clinics back home. Aaliyah became more than a director of outreach. She became a bridge between worlds. She taught the Sheikh and his advisors how to truly listen to those without titles. She translated more than just language, she translated experience. And the Sheikh, to his credit, didn't just nod along. He funded language classes for staff. He created programs that allowed workers to study during off hours. He restructured hiring pipelines to give internal candidates real opportunities, not just token ones. And it spread beyond his estate. Other elites, curious or perhaps shamed, began to evaluate their own homes, their own companies. Some changed out of guilt. Others out of admiration. But change began, however small. Media outlets tried to spin Aaliyah's rise into a rags-to-riches tale. But those who met her knew better. She had never been rags. She had always been rich, in intellect, in dignity, in patience. The world just hadn't caught up. And now that it had, she didn't let it forget where she came from. She refused lavish gifts. Declined personal interviews with talk shows. She asked instead for donations to education charities, language programs and refugee support. Because Aaliyah wasn't interested in becoming a celebrity. She wanted to become a catalyst. And in that mission she had already succeeded. So what does it all mean? A single moment, one question in Arabic, one soft but confident response, changed the course of more than just one woman's life. It shifted a room full of the wealthy and influential. It changed the attitude of a household. It touched the hearts of youth across a nation. And perhaps most powerfully, it reminded the world that dignity does not require permission. Aaliyah's story wasn't just about language. It was about being heard after being overlooked for so long. It was about grace under pressure, power through silence, and brilliance that doesn't scream, it simply shines. It was about how true worth can be hidden in the corners, disguised by a uniform, buried beneath assumptions. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't demand to be respected. She simply showed who she was, with clarity, calm, and courage. And in doing so, she inspired others to step forward, to speak, to remember their own worth, even if the world hadn't recognized it yet. And the Sheikh? He did what few men in his position ever do. He listened. He acted. And because of that, his legacy will now carry something far more valuable than gold or oil: human impact. Aaliyah's journey is not just one of personal victory. It's a mirror. It asks all of us, who have we ignored because they didn't fit our idea of intelligence? What brilliance have we missed because it wasn't spoken in our language? What changes are we capable of making, not with wealth or status, but simply by paying attention? At Dream Tale, we share stories like this because they remind us what truly matters. Not fame, not fortune, but the quiet power of a voice that dares to speak when the world expects silence. If Aaliyah's story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone in your own life, someone unseen, underappreciated, but incredibly gifted, share this video with them. Tag them. Let them know they are seen. And if you're new here, welcome to Dream Tale, where the overlooked become unforgettable. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts. What did this story mean to you? Have you ever witnessed a moment like this? Your voice matters. Use it. Because someone, somewhere is finally listening.